welcome everybody. I am Julie Womack. This is Julie Collins. If you can been to events with us, you know that we're the Julies. We are happy to have everybody here. If you have never been to a Red Wine and Blue event before, then let us just say welcome. Red Wine and Blue is a community of over 500,000 diverse suburban women. We are committed to defeating extremism in our community. And we want everyone to be informed and understand the issues so that they can go out and talk to their friends, which is so important in this upcoming election. And so that is why we are gathered here tonight to talk about a topic that probably most of us are like, the economy. It's kind of a big deal, right? And so we have just launched a campaign called Momonomics. And that's why we are gathering everyone here tonight. And I am so thrilled, Julie. Do you see we have like over 500 people here to talk about the economy tonight?
That's fantastic. That's absolutely fantastic. I
So,
know it's a tough subject that everybody, needs more information on.
so Momonomics, we are, I guess, officially launching it right now. We've been doing some stuff around, but Momonomics is just a fun way to say the economy. So we think that the economy should be run more like a family, you know, where everyone's needs are met. And we know that moms, particularly, have a lot of say in spending. You have a lot of say on what your family spends, but you do not need to be a mom to be part of this campaign. We agree that everybody's impacted by it. This is our fun way to do this. So we are really glad you're here tonight so we can answer all of those economic questions that you keep hearing from your friends and your family. And maybe you're even scratching your head going, I don't really get that. I don't know how that works. I don't either. And that's why we have Shereen here tonight and also our messaging expert, Jess, to help you figure out how to have those conversations.
So tonight we want to give you talking points and confidence that you need to talk with your friends and your family about the economy and the importance of this upcoming election, of course. So we want to thank everybody who submitted questions in advance because we're not going to be able to answer every question in 1 hour. However, we will be holding future events and continue to share this information online as well, because we know how important this is for you. We know how much you want to be able to speak with friends and family about this topic.
We are going to start then and bring up Jess McIntosh. I know many of you know Jess. She is our fan favorite here at Red Wine and Blue. Jess has worked at all levels of campaigns, including presidential. She has helped candidates and organizations with communication and strategy. She had her own Sirius XM radio show, Signal Boost, with Zerlina Maxwell for 5 years, and she's a regular contributor at major publications and on CNN. So we are bringing her on to help you figure out how to talk to your family and friends about economic, mostly disinformation, because you know there's a lot of that going around. So we're going to lead with just having that conversation so that you are ready to go. And then we'll bring Shereen on to actually talk about the economic issues and the questions that you all have submitted. So Jess, I'm going to turn it over to you, and you can talk to us a little bit about who should we be talking to and who should we not be talking to.
Thank you so much, Julie and Julie. So the first thing that I wanted to do before we get into hearing from an actual expert on the economy, which I am most certainly not, is talk to you about having these conversations to begin with. Because while I am somebody who is not at all an expert on the economy, I feel entirely comfortable having these kinds of conversations because I know what's expected of me and I know what works the best. And the truth is, what works the best is you talking about your own personal experience. Like, that's it. Talking about how the economy affects all of us in so many ways. Talking about educating your children, talking about planning family vacations, retiring when you're able to do it, they're taking jobs or passing up promotions, dropping out of the workforce for childcare. All of these are monumental life decisions that happen because the economy interacts with us, because we are making those decisions for our families. So what I want you to do when you have these conversations is think about your own story. And that is, I promise you, the only thing you have to be an expert in. So let's talk a little bit about who to talk to before we talk about what to say. Since we're talking about disinformation, right? sometimes disinformation is shared because a good-intentioned, a well-intentioned person sees something that scares them, they believe it, and that requires a little bit of a conversation to get them back into the fact-based reality track. Sometimes people spread disinformation because they know it's not true, but they want to get under your skin. Or they really hate your candidate, but it's for another reason. So they're going to say this instead. So I want you to separate those two groups in your mind. It's pretty obvious who is who. You'll hear a lot of buzzwords. If you hear the kind of disinformation like women just aren't good with money, let's say, anybody my age or older heard that one at some point in their lives. If you're talking to somebody who is spreading that, I want you to go ahead and end that conversation. It's fine. We don't need them. We have 85 some odd days until the election, and it is a-okay if you don't waste a single other second talking to them. If these are the people who are your dads, your uncles, if they're in your immediate life and it matters a lot to you, that is very difficult work. It will take a very long time. The best thing you can do is keep making it okay for them to talk to you. Ask them questions, share your opinion, create a little space, but recognize that you are playing a long game. And right now, we don't really have a long game. Right now, we've got a 3-month game. So go ahead and put those conversations to the side. If it's not somebody who is in your life that you really feel like you need to reach, I'm talking a lot about Facebook here. I really want you to ignore these people. If you've seen me do this before, I apologize. I'm going to do it again. It is honestly the way that I have found folks most get exactly what the tactic is here when they spread this kind of disinformation online. Most of you, I'm going to guess, have seen the meme that's the change my mind guy. It's a man sitting at a folding table in a public area, and he's got a little sign up, and it says something incendiary, and then it says change my mind, right? We've seen this guy. The first one that I ever saw was women are bad drivers, change my mind. Now, I can knock that down in a single sentence. We have lower insurance as drivers because we're better. That's it. It's empirical data. The insurance companies are not slave to some woke agenda trying to recorrect the patriarchy, wage gap, whatever. No, they give us better deals because we are better drivers. That's it, full stop. You actually can't argue with it. Now, if I stopped in the park to explain that to the guy with the women are bad drivers, change my mind sign, would I change his mind? No, I wouldn't. Would he be happy that I stopped? Even if I had such a devastating takedown? Yeah, he would. And why is that? Because his goal is not actually to debate me. It's to waste my time. And if I stop and I try to knock down what he's saying, he wins. Even if I make a better point, I have wasted my time. I have spoken to that man for my time in the public park and not to the 99% of people who are ready, willing, and able to have the conversation with me. So I set this up right now because I want you on the economy and frankly on every other topic of conversation that is electoral or political or civic engagement related, at least through November. I want you to walk past the change my mind guy online and off because everybody else actually needs to hear from you. Red, white, and blue is all about talking to your friends and your own networks. This is so important. Those are the people who are going to agree with you as long as they know that there's a fight and that it pertains to them. So when you find somebody, almost everybody in your life should be like this, that is a well-intentioned person who wants to have a conversation with you, go ahead and do that. You're going to find common ground, right? You're going to meet their concerns. Even if they might disagree with you on some things, their concerns are probably coming from a very genuine place. It's probably fear about their family and their security and their financial stability. You share those concerns. So go ahead and find that common ground together. Then you're having a productive conversation about how to make sure your family feels more stable and more secure. And that is just such a better ground to be on than who's right and who's wrong about whatever. So we're going to find common ground. We're going to make it incredibly local. And I mean so local, it is your kitchen table. We're going to make it very personal. Like you're going to talk about your economic reality. And that's how we're going to have these conversations going forward. So I don't want anybody wasting their time with the change my mind guy. And I don't want anybody thinking that they have to be an expert in the economy in order to engage in these conversations. And if I can leave you with both of those things, I will have done my job tonight. And I am very excited at this point to turn it over to somebody who is an expert on the economy and can in fact talk to you more about that. So I'm going to sit here and learn with all of you. I'm sure that I will have questions as well, but thank you so much for being here. Over 600 people on a Tuesday night. This is amazing. You all are going to save democracy. All right, Julie, thank you.
I know 600 people to learn about the economy, which makes me so excited because we know how important it is. We know it's a hot topic. We know people care about it. So we want to give you the tools to go out there, follow Jess's advice, and actually talk to your friends. So I am really excited to bring up Shereen Boyer. Shereen has done a couple of events with us, and everyone's always raved about them because she has a way of explaining difficult topics and making it kind of like economy for dummies. So I'm happy to be here to learn tonight from her. Shereen has her BA in economics from the College of Worcester, an MBA in finance and business from University of Chicago, and she's a certified financial planner and has over 30 years of experience in finance. So we are really, really thrilled to have you here tonight. Thank you, Shereen, for joining us.
Thank you, Julie, and Julie and Jess. Good to be here.
So we keep hearing that the economy is recovering, but a lot of us are still feeling the pain of high prices and inflation. So let's kind of get into this. So why are grocery prices still so high if the economy is doing better?
That's such a good question. Let me just step back and say, give a little background to this. We are not in a recession. This has been a miraculous economic recovery. And if you are a nerd like me and read the business press, you will see that financial institution after financial institution says how incredible it is. Inflation was at a high of over 9%. It's now under 3%. However, there are pockets of the economy that are still recovering from the pandemic and some other factors, and groceries happen to be one of those. And so while we've seen prices come down in many areas, groceries tend to be a very sticky price, and it's something that we all experience every time we go shopping, and so it's an important issue. There are really 3 things that continue to contribute to the prices of groceries. So one of these is during the pandemic, prices went up. We heard numerous stories about shrinkflation. So instead of getting 12 ounces, you're getting, 10.8. And historically, corporations don't ever undo price increases because corporations are for profit. And once the price goes up and consumers become acclimated to it, there's very little incentive for a business to cut its prices, even though the factors that brought that price increase into play may be gone. So the pandemic has ended, the supply chain disruptions have largely resolved, and yet we go to the grocery store and we still see very high prices. And part of that is just corporations see an opportunity to keep the prices high, because if you need milk or you need eggs or you need cereal, there really isn't an alternative. The second thing that contributes to that is in many markets, we have monopoly-like grocery store change. So there's a lack of competition. And there's very little that an individual can do if you live in one of those markets to go outside that market and get your groceries. But you know who can step in and deal with corporate greed and monopoly-like conditions? The government. That's an issue for regulators. So the third thing that contributes to high grocery prices is climate change. We're having these tremendous weather disruptions. And just to give you a couple of examples, the cherry crops in northern Michigan this year, the cherry capital of the country, are going to be down by 40 to 70%. They're still harvesting. The late cherries haven't come in yet, so there's some question how low that's going to go. But the storms and the freezes and the heat have devastated the cherry crop this year. Well, if you go to the grocery store and you want cherry something, and there's half as many cherries available, the price goes up because the same number of us who are fans. The orange crops in Florida in 2022, because there was a hurricane that devastated at a key part of the growing season, and they had the worst year of crops since 1933. Close to 70% of the orange crop was devastated by weather. So if you are interested in long-term lower grocery prices, you know what helps that? Policies that address climate change. And then finally, an additional factor. So we've got corporate greed. We have monopoly-like conditions in many markets. We have weather, climate impact that is affecting farmers and crops. And then the fourth thing we have is that if you look at, say, poultry and eggs, turkeys, since the avian flu in 2002, 95 million birds have been disposed of, have been killed as a result of that. And again, when you have to kill an animal, breed another animal, it's very disruptive to prices. And well, some of these things happen. Do you know what helps these things? The FDA and early inspection and catching these kinds of things early so they don't spread across the states. And so if you are concerned about grocery prices for the longer term, we want to see policies that help us in the short term, but equally important, policies that address the long-term issues that are going to continue to make prices go up. And so we want to see those come into place if you want grocery bills to go back to something more sustainable. But the pain is real. The pain is real.
Well, a lot of people want to blame Biden for inflation, but a lot of the policies that contributed to this situation were actually started under Trump. So can you explain what led to, this recent inflation?
Oh, absolutely. And inflation has a lot of factors. So I'm gonna simplify this down. I love this stuff, and we could talk about this for 2 hours with me, but most people don't have the same passion for it. But the economic decisions from one administration to the next, it's a lot like if you're disciplining your child, or more importantly, if you fail to discipline your child. You don't see the effects of that on the day it happens necessarily, but you start to see the effects of not disciplining a child a year, 2, 3, 4 years down the road. And a lot of the policies from previous administrations, that's exactly how it works. So did the pain come under Biden? Yeah. Did a lot of it get caused by Biden? No. So for example, the Trump 2017 tax cut, which if there's time later, we can talk about a little bit more, but all of us know that kind of the basic rule of economics, home economics, government economics, is you put money aside in the good times for the rainy days. And so when the economy was doing well, 2013, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, that is when the government should be paying down the deficit and putting money aside for what the next economic bump will be. It turned out it was the pandemic, but it could have been any number of things. It happens regularly. We can't say what it is, but it's absolutely foreseeable that there will be those economic things where the government needs to step in. But kind of like a grandparent who gives, the ice cream cone and the Snickers bar and the can of soda to your child just before they return them home. The 2017 tax cut was just that. It was a sugar rush. It goosed the economy, right? In the near term, but it set us up to be more vulnerable in the long term. So we came into the pandemic, we came into it with a sizable and growing deficit. And during the pandemic, that is exactly when the government should step in and make sure businesses don't fail, and make sure people don't lose their home, and make sure that all of those things come into play. That is the right and appropriate time for government to deficit spend, not just because, we want to give something to our constituents. That's not a good reason to cut taxes. And so the inflation under Biden was partially a result of the pandemic, which actually began under Trump. And I would argue that the US response to that was poor initially. And part of it was a global event. And when you shut down ports in China and Vietnam and England, and no goods are moving anyplace, and everybody wants to buy a bike or a yeast or whatever it was, we're all chasing that, and nothing is coming in. And so with more of us wanting to do it and those goods not coming in, prices go up. The pandemic, the vaccine, we've seen a steady improvement in that. And that is why inflation has dropped from over 9% to under 3%. There's still stickiness around food, but we're seeing improvements in all the other areas. Another example, there was something called the TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which would have been an absolute economic boon for the United States. And nearly 5 years, just over 5 years ago, Trump pulled out of that. And what that basically was going to be is the US and Asian Pacific nations, excluding China. It was supposed to be a counterweight against China. And it would have given the United States, there would have been significant economic boons to that, free trade. There would have also been, we would have had a seat at the table in terms of drafting trade legislation and could have made it more favorable to the United States. We pulled out of that. And the damage of that decision is going to roll out over many years. And we can't unring that bell. It also would have helped the United States maintain the dollar as the primary currency for global trade. Well, when the United States acts erratically, we're in the Paris Accord, we're out. We're in TPP, we're out. We're basically signaling you can't count on us. And again, you don't see the impact of you can't count on us on day one. But what happens over time is businesses and companies and countries begin to look at, is there a second alternative? The US currency is still central, but can I hedge my bets a little bit and park some money elsewhere? And we have benefited from countries and companies wanting to park the money in the US. It has been an absolute economic boom. And when we signal to them by this sort of erratic, poorly thought out, we're in it, we're out of it, we're in it, we're out of it, we are encouraging them to go elsewhere. It's like if you had a care provider, if you have an older person and you have to get to work. My mother lived with me for the last 6.5 years of her life. If I have to go to work and one day they come and the next day they don't, next Tuesday they come, next Thursday they don't, what it tells me is I can't rely on that person and I need to make other plans. And so these policies in the near term don't look like much. The damage wasn't visible under Trump, but it's absolutely visible now. It's a lot like Brexit. Do any of you remember Brexit?
Yes.
Where England wanted to pull out of the European Union? It was 100% predictable that this was going to be economically devastating for England. And there was disinformation, just like what you were talking about, which is that this was going to be a great boon. And what it has turned out to be is if England were a state of the United States, they would rank dead last, 51st in GDP per capita. And it was 100% predictable and self-imposed. And so they had a vision, an anti-immigration, anti-worker vision, but they also made it incredibly complicated for businesses to remain based in England. And so when you see these policies that might have a lot of political zing in an election year, might appeal to a base, the problem is we all pay the price for decades to come.
I saw a great question in the chat. Someone was saying in the chat that they don't see the difference between their friends are like, I don't see the difference between the two administrations. I think the things you just laid out, we know Trump's going to deregulate. He's going to take away agencies that do those things. He's not going to address climate change. And then obviously has not treated the economy in the way it should be. So thank you for outlining all of that. Well, we're going to do 2 more quick questions and then we're going to pull up our other guest here. But can you say a little bit about what is the national budget deficit, I'm sorry,
Sure.
and why does it keep growing? And then what is our national debt? And what do all those terms mean?
Okay, absolutely. And I just wanted to say one thing about not much difference between the two administrations. The Trump administration pulled us out of the TPP, which would have been a counter to China, made us weaker against China. The Biden administration has passed the CHIP Act, where we are going to try and not be as dependent on Taiwan, which is going to be a flashpoint in the future. Right now, more than 90% of all the chips that run our phones and computers come out of that region. So there is a huge difference It's in the details, and I can appreciate why that's not immediately obvious, but there is a huge difference in terms of where we're going. So a bit about the deficit. I think of economics like a magic wand, like I'm Elsa with the wand, and I get to point it at the things I value. And if you value education and you point your money wand there, that's what you do. If you value early childhood education, if you value helping middle-class families, what you point the economic Elsa wand at is what you get. The deficit is basically when the government is running, they're spending more than they're taking in. And you can do that at certain times, but the point you want to think about is during the good times, you should see the deficit go down, just like in your family. When everybody's working, when everybody's healthy, that's when you want to make sure your financial house is in order, because somewhere up ahead, somebody's going to break a leg or get sick or lose a job or have hours reduced. And you need to be in an economically stable position in order to absorb those natural shocks that come with life. So when Bill Clinton left office, there was zero deficit. I was still a Republican at that point. And then George Bush, when he came into office, he did three things. He cut taxes, he increased prescription benefit for seniors, and we went to war. Now, we could have a conversation about, as a country collectively, what do we value? Because what we value is what we vote for, and that is what we get. And so we could have a conversation, post 9/11, we needed to go to war. Okay, then we need to pay for it. That was the first time in the history of our country where we didn't either pay for the war in real time or immediately afterwards. Instead, what we did is we ran up a deficit. And so rather than asking every American, if this is something that we're going to do, if we're sending men and women into harm's way, can't we all pitch in and pay the price? Can't we pay for it? Do I need to have a tax cut and get my Xbox on top of it? So the tax cut, I think seniors, I think that the cost of prescription drugs is too high. I think what Biden has done with getting some of those drugs capped in price is fantastic. It helps families who have those issues. If we value that, then we have to pay for it. And so that, I really feel like the Republican Party left me. I didn't leave the Republican Party. It used to be kind of a conversation about economic stability and social values. And then it just became kind of a free-for-all. So when the financial crisis happened in 08 and 09, in part to deregulation, we already came into that running a deficit. And a lot of people don't realize how close we came to actually a second Great Depression in 2009. So the government stepped in and started spending. They backed the banks. They backed businesses. They did the cash for clunkers. They did all kinds of things on the fly to try and prevent a second Great Depression. And it was successful. And the challenge is that people have a tough time imagining what could have been. And so it's easy to go, oh, I know somebody who took advantage of that program. But what you don't see is that we were all saved by the government running a deficit. And they typically spend when economic activity is down. And so you see the deficit expand. And then what happens is, and it happened 10, 11, 12, 13, once the economy recovered, the deficit started to go back down. That's how it should work. The Trump tax cuts in 2017, that should have been the period where the deficit was going down. Instead, what happened is it exploded the deficit. So when the next entirely predictable crisis that the government had to deal with came along, we didn't know what it was, but we knew one would be coming. We were on our heels because we had already kind of given away the money that we would have done that. So we ran up the deficit, further exacerbating inflation. So you cannot spend and not pay for it. You cannot have tax cuts. The Trump bill was sold that it was going to benefit all of us. Well, that didn't happen. The tax cuts for businesses were permanent. The tax cuts for individuals go away in 2025. They disproportionately, 45% of all the benefits from that tax cuts in dollars went to the top 5% of the population. So if you think Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos or You know, pick your favorite multimillionaire or billionaire should have their taxes cut. That's the party for you. If you want to have your, you know, not lose your house, if you want to have job stability, if there's a downturn in the economy, you want the government to be able to step in and provide support during that period, you vote with your dollars. And it's absolutely clear which party is going to support women, working families, middle class. There's really no question.
I do want to say one thing to you, Shereen. There was a suggestion in the chat that you get a Substack and grace us with this information periodically, daily, if
Oh.
possible, like Heather Cox Richardson does.
There were lots of seconds to that suggestion. Just you were talking and not reading, but
Oh, can
you
I
have
say
a fan
just
base
one-
built in.
Thank you all. Can I just say one thing about taxes? So the Trump tax cut for us as individuals goes away next year. And the party in power is going to decide what happens next. And if you are familiar with Project 2025, they have a tax policy laid out there. And the gist of it is, let's get rid of all the deductions, get rid of all those things, which right there, you're talking chaos, because you've got a lot of homeowners who rely on being able to deduct their interest and a certain amount of their property taxes in order to afford their home. So I'm trying to just imagine what those families, what those working families are going to do when what they thought they were going to have and what they have are so very different. What's more than that, they're talking about a flat 15% tax cut for those under 168,000 in income, no deductions. And on the surface, that sounds really good, but I ran a few numbers and I looked at our current tax code. So if you currently make up to 47,000, you pay about 9%. So if you're looking to go up by 66% in your taxes and you're in that earnings bracket, I mean, the Republican Party is for you. If you make up to about 100,000, and that is 100,000 after your deduction. So gross that up for if you deduct interest on your home, et cetera. At about 100,000 is about where that break-even point at 15% is. And so the Republican policies are very regressive. They tend to put the burden on the working class families and lower income, and they give significant breaks to the wealthiest. That's why almost half of the benefits from Trump's tax cuts went to the top 5%. The Democrats tend to have progressive taxes, which is to say, the more you make, the more you pay. And we can argue about, what percentage that should be. But just on its face, it's kind of obscene to me that we would take somebody paying $25,000 and have them pay more in taxes than we would charge somebody who's making $250,000.
Absolutely.
Oh.
Thank you, Shereen. Like I said, I think the chat's blowing up. We're going to figure out how to get you on Substack. So, but as we are talking about how families are affected by tax cuts in the economy, we really want, this is a good time to bring up our next guest who wants to going to share a personal story here. So I'm going to bring up Jo Carducci and have her share her story about the impact of the child tax credit.
Hi. Hi, Jess, Julie, Shereen. I need all those J's out. There's a lot of J's. Shereen, this is fascinating and it is so informative. And you're breaking things down into these super easy to digest bite-sized pieces, which is incredible because that's how we can have these conversations with our friends. And I thank you for that. But this idea of, which administration would be working for the American people and which wouldn't. I mean, we just had a vote on expanding the child tax credit, and J.D. Vance in particular didn't even bother to show up for that vote, and the Republicans blocked it. And that's a very personal one for me, because my story as it relates to that is during the peak of the pandemic, I was a newly single mom of two amazing kids. I was working as a paraprofessional making about $400 a week take home. That's what I was making. And I didn't have any additional support. And I was struggling. I was struggling to feed my kids, to keep the lights on, to keep the water hot. I was struggling so much that, and here's my ugly cry. I'm going to try and breathe on this one. My girlfriends were sneaking groceries into my car. So my kids didn't know. Sorry. And I was on the phone with the oil company, like begging them to like, please don't shut, please put some oil in my tank, et cetera, et cetera. So many of us have been there. And the child tax credit, I got one. It was enough. It was a lifeline enough that I got through, and it saved my little family. Sorry, somebody saved me because I'm ugly crying, but I know
you saved your little family. I mean, the safety nets there to get on, but you did that with your network for your girls too. Please,
well,
you
thank you, Jess. I promise I'll stop crying. But like you're right. But knowing like that we have, an administration in place right now and a future administration that understands that it's worth spending the money on these things, on my family, on other families. Like today I was at an event here in DC where it was Americans who had diabetes talking about how that $35 insulin cap has changed their lives. And we know that this administration cares, that Kamala Harris and Tim Walz care. And that gives me so much hope for the future and for other families that will be in my situation. I hope no one ever is, but that they'll have an administration in place that sees them and cares and wants to help them and wants to spend that money right there and not on the uber wealthy like Donald Trump.
Thank you so much. I mean, we can see how much this can benefit families like Joe. And she's right. You're obviously not the only person who has been in that situation. So it is really frustrating to see that 46 Republican senators just voted against extending the child care tax credit that made it possible for you to keep the water hot for your kids. So let's talk about that vote and the potential outcome. Why do you think it wasn't? Why do you think they didn't extend it, Shereen?
Well, I think because they can get away with it. I think that there's so much misinformation, and JD Vance trots out there and floats this idea that we're going to double it for everybody. But I was raised by watch what they do, not what they say. And so I don't fall for this, oh, the Republicans are going to double it. No, I saw you just voted it down. And so many times these credits, it's not something that you need forever. Joe, your story just, I can relate to a lot of what you said in terms of being a single parent. And for me, it's more about the getting squished between caring for my mother and my daughters, but you didn't need that forever, right? You just needed a little bit of a cushion at a time when things were hard, and then you can pick up and go on. And when you think about what that tiny investment does, and I call it an investment because you're worthy of that investment. Your children are worthy of that investment, keeping their home life stable, keeping you together in a place that has huge benefits, not only to your family, but to your community and to the country and to the economy. Because kids who have that kind of benefit and families that have that help, that's good for all of us. And so, it's a hand up, not a hand out. And we all sometimes need that, whether it's, a health thing or, an aging parent or a sick child or a job loss or, a financial setback of whatever kind. And so the child tax credit is one of those. And when they vote it down, they're willing to play politics with people's lives, like all of us here tonight. And maybe that one wasn't the one that the roulette wheel didn't land on you on that one, but it landed on somebody. There are families out there now, in dire straits because of that. And it could be any one of us in the future. And we get to choose with our vote what kind of world we want. We get to point our Elsa wand and say, you know what we value? We really value families. We value a middle class. I want to live in a country where a strong middle class is good for all of us. Almost 2/3 of the economy is based on consumer spending. And if you look at countries where there's a huge wealth gap with the super wealthy and with a large part of the population in poverty, you see a lot of instability, you see a lot of problems. It is good for all of us if our neighbors stay in their homes, if their kids stay in school, if the lights stay on, That is good for all of us. It's not the sugar high rush that you get to, you know, zoom around the country and what was it, Jeffrey Epstein's jet last week. But it's the kind of thing that when Biden and Trump and Harris and Waltz are long gone, we're still going to be in this economy. And I am very interested in seeing us build an economy that is not feast or famine, that is not where Clinton leaves us with zero deficit and, you know, then they give the whole house away and then, you know, they have to clean it up and then we get it back on track. And then, oh, here's another tax cut. And now here we are trying to get it back on track again. So I hope that you'll all consider how the economics really benefit us all.
Thank you so much, Joe, for coming and sharing your story. I'm 100% agree with what Jess said. You did save your family, and we are all going to fight like hell so that women are not in that situation and that they have the support they need. I know that there are so many of you watching, and we're so glad to have all of you here. So I want to make sure that you all, because you can reach a lot of people, your friends and your networks, and we want you to be spreading the word about this. So we have social media posts that are ready to go. You just have to go and share them. I recommend using your phone because everything is copy pasted, ready to go. I'm going to drop the link to that. You can also scan that QR code. But I do want to jump back in and make sure we keep asking Shereen questions because we're going to try to power through as many questions as we can here.
Shereen, my husband's student loans were actually forgiven. I still have debt that I'm going to be paying until I literally die. And now my kids, they're all in their 30s and they all have student loan debt as well. And it's to the point now where I don't know that I'm going to be able to retire. They don't know if they're ever going to be able to buy a home. They have, they harp so much on being childless in this conversation that they've been having. My kids don't even want to have kids because they don't think they can afford them. So, can you talk about the long-term benefits of student loan reduction or forgiveness, which we took another blow this week, I saw, but who benefits from these, these policies when we have that?
Oh, that's such a good question, Julie. And I'm happy for your family, for your husband, and we'll keep pushing to improve this situation for all the rest of us. A couple of thoughts about student loans, assistance with college, that sort of thing. And again, we vote with our dollars, what we value. And as a country, we decided that we valued veterans who served the country, and we provide economic, educational opportunities to our veterans. We provide educational opportunities to their children, whether they see active duty or not, because we've decided that is a value. And so right there, I think it's good to remember that during the pandemic, we learned that teachers, people working in nonprofits, firefighters, police, lots and lots of people who were out there working are also a lot of the people who are carrying these student loans. And if we decide we want to make a value statement and say, you know what, there are lots of ways to serve. I value I have 2 daughters. I value their teachers. I value the firefighters. I value that. And that we can, in fact, just decide collectively that this is something we want to do. And so let me talk a little bit about some of the pushback that we sometimes hear from that and why that really isn't good economic. It's not really founded in really good, solid economics. So one of the things people say is, I got through on my own. Why should I help somebody else? And if that person is older, there was a time in this country where you could work and pay for college and come out without debt. Those days are gone. There is not, it's almost impossible, not impossible, but almost impossible, given how education has gone up at the inflation rate that it has, at 6 or 7% for decades. It's almost impossible to fund your way through college. And so that's the first thing. The economics are different. The olden days are gone. We have to deal with where we're at. Secondly, that you're exactly right that when folks are turned into a for-profit center, and that's what a number of the student loans are, that they have interest rates that are well above what the current interest rates are. And there is very little ability. If you got a student loan after 2006, your interest rate is fixed. It's not variable. And so we've turned education into for-profit. And that is a value that puts all of us in a bad position. You don't have to go to college. There are lots of other jobs you do, but there are certainly benefits to society from an educated population. And we have to decide, do we want to look at our children and our grandchildren and say, you know what, I want to make a buck off of you. I am comfortable with a business turning you into a profit center to get your education. I don't believe that. I don't believe in that. And so although the broad sped relief that Biden had made a goal that everybody would have at least $10,000 in relief has been blocked, he's very strategically tried to find specific groups. So, you know, $10,000 that goes to if you're a firefighter, if you're a school teacher, and those kinds of targeted benefits, I think benefit all of us. You make the point, how are people going to retire? How are people going to buy homes? If you're a homeowner and you have a generation that's not going to be able to buy your home, guess what happens to the value of your home? We're interconnected. We are interconnected. And I don't need you to suffer. If I don't carry the in order for it to be fair. There are lots of things that aren't fair. There are lots of value judgments we make about who we see as valuable. We value teachers. We value early childhood education. We value families, right? There are all kinds of tax benefits for families. There's no reason that we need to make student loans for profit on the backs of the people who are currently in them, which is a disgrace as a country that we make a profit off of education. At a minimum, charge what the interest rates were. Over the last, until very recently, you would have been paying almost 0% on interest rates. Why were we charging people 8 and 9%? It's obscene. Right. A lot of the forgiveness programs, people have had to pay 10 years, 20 years, 25 years. They're approaching retirement. Well, what are we going to do with people who have student loans, don't retire? How do we expect this to go? How do we expect this to go? And so we are interconnected. There are a lot more things I can say about this, but it is not a giveaway to an individual. It is a collective vote about what we value. And I would just say, there are a dozen different ways we could do it. It doesn't have to be Biden's plan. But in terms of the value of not making money off the backs of our children and grandchildren, not even us making money off of it, not like the country. No, we're talking about businesses. It's obscene. It's like those high interest loans for service members, right? It's terrible. So if we value education, if we value families, if we want people to be able to retire, start a family, we have to address it.
This sounds to me like what we're talking about with Momonomics, right? We want to have an economy that values the things that are important to us, which is how we run our family budgets, right? So I'm going to jump here to a question about just interest rates. So okay. My kids are in their 20s and they're looking to buy a home in a few years. My husband and I bought homes at really low interest rates. So a generation of Americans grew up with this very low interest rate. And now during this time of rising rates, they're learning the hard way, you know, that credit is expensive and it's really hard to pay off. So can you tell us like what has happened with things like credit card debt over the past few years?
I just wanted to say a quick word on behalf of those who are under 40. In a capitalist society, there are all kinds of incentives. And if you are under 40, you are responding exactly to the economic incentives that you received, which is the country got itself into a financial crisis that was so dire, the Federal Reserve cut interest rates to 0 and kept them there for almost 15 years. So if you are under 40, the only experience you have had is essentially 0% interest rates. And what is the normal thing and natural thing and incentive thing to do under that? You carry debt. Hey, if I can have free money for 15 years, you'd be a fool not to take that incentive. And so younger people are not lazy, not getting it. They are reacting to their lived experience, and they will adjust to this new environment, which is interest rates are at a normal level now. Give them a year or two to adjust, much in the same way that if you were living off your portfolio in 2007, you could have comfortably gotten 7% interest rates with no risk. By 2009, you could have gotten 0.5% of interest. That was a huge cut to your income. And it took a little time for them to make that adjustment. And younger people are making the adjustment. But they deserve a smoother economic environment. And this whiplash, it damages all of us. So I just want to say, if you're carrying credit card debt, you got to pay it off. It's deadly. I get why when it was at 0%, it made no difference. That was why they cut them to 0, because they needed us to spend in 2009. Buy a car for 7 years, 0 interest. Buy a refrigerator, 5 years, 0 interest. The incentive was to buy. That's what saved us from going into a deeper recession or depression. That was the government policy. And so now that it's turning around in a different direction, you cannot blame people for having done exactly what the incentives were to do.
Throughout this conversation tonight, we've seen a lot of ways that life is economically hard for the average American. So why was a single income enough to raise a family in the 70s, but now in the 2020s, we struggle with 2 incomes? I think that's really something that folks don't understand.
It's a great question. Real wages until very recently, adjusted for inflation, hadn't gone up in over 30 years. Real wages adjusted for inflation until recently hadn't gone up in almost 30 years. That's why. Because we can't afford a minimum wage. We're not going to, though that is what people live off of. And so again, because of the pandemic, because people left the workforce, because of some union organizing. I mean, you saw the UAW successfully increase wages for their member companies. And then what did we see? Non-union businesses, non-union automakers increase their wages. They have record profits. There is the money to do it. But again, if we're cutting their tax rates, they're not going to just give you the money, right? So we set up a structure and we are getting exactly what we set up. But we can change it. Our votes can change it. We can point our economic wand and say, you know what? No business should be paying 0%. And you don't need the tax cut. And guess what? Under Trump's business pass-through, where if you own if you have certain businesses and practices, your tax cut is cut dramatically from what you would pay. Look, people who work hard and got education, built a business, they should have more. They've earned it. But how much more? Do they need us to underwrite them? Do we need working families to be unable to, put aside a little for retirement, put a little aside for their kids? No. I know Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk want to box each other and get to space first. Fine. You could pay taxes and still have that going up, right? But I don't need to underwrite it. You don't need to underwrite it.
Y'all, we could talk about this probably for the next 2 hours. Like we had so many, like I said, there were so many questions that came in. We couldn't, even get through everything we wanted to get through tonight because there were so many great questions. So I would like to do final thoughts. I do want to share again, like what we really asking you all to do tonight. There are over 600, almost 700 of you on this call tonight. Please share about Momonomics because we are going to try to address all of these issues, even the ones we didn't get to tonight. So we want to be that resource for you. We want to make sure your friends are also knowing that they can get this information and talk about it because we need to all be talking about it. So we've been dropping in the chat. This is the QR code. But I do want to give final thoughts. Jess, I'm sorry, we had to cut Jess's question because we just had to get through stuff. So Jess, your final thoughts, anything you want to share from listening to all of this?
I learned so much tonight. Oh my gosh. Like just the idea that real wages didn't go up in 30 years when I'm like 42. And also Biden's had a hard row of it under with what he inherited. But the fact that wages are going up now in that context just feels like even more radically good. So Yeah, learning the history and learning the context of this stuff is just so important. But please feel empowered to have these conversations. You know, a lot of the financial institution is really opaque. It's hard. We don't know the terms, and so we feel we can't talk about it. But just like Joe did, you can just share your stories. We all have them. Yeah, Shereen, thank you. You're amazing.
Oh, thank you.
Any final thoughts for you, Shereen, that you would like to share out?
I would just say that having been in finance for over 30 years, so often they do what I think insurance companies try and do. They try and make you feel intimidated to speak about it. Don't let them. We all understand this on an intuitive basis, right? We all understand it. And hopefully you got a few nuggets here that give you a little bit more confidence, but I cannot tell you the number of times I've engaged with people, and the harder they come, oftentimes the shallower the knowledge. And you can, simply speak to your own lived experience. And I think we're going to get this. And just remember that what we vote for, what we value, what we point our wand at is the future we're going to have, our families are going to have, parents, our children, our communities. And, with just a few days to go to the election, we can have a huge impact on that trajectory. So thank you all for inviting me.
Okay, I'm laughing so hard because you're saying the harder they come, the less knowledge they have. I think that's applicable across a lot of issues, not just the economy. So that is the perfect way, I think, to end this event. So thank you all. Please go out there and share the Momonomics campaign, and please come back to the next event. And I promise we will do something else with the economy, and I promise we'll bring Shereen back and we will promote her Substack soon. So everybody have a really great evening.